The knife went in below the ribs, precise, angled upward, designed to pierce both hearts before the victim even knew they'd been struck. Argyltal staggered, looked down, saw the blade protruding from his chest, still vibrating from the impact. His possessed form flickered, the demon inside him screaming in rage and confusion. He'd been fighting an ultramarine, had been winning, hadn't sensed the attack from behind. He turned his head, saw who held the weapon. "Erebus!" The First Chaplain twisted the blade, watched as one of the word-bearer's greatest warriors collapsed to his knees, watched the light fade from eyes that had trusted him, served beside him, called him brother. "Nothing personal, Argyltal. You were simply in the way." That's Erebus. That moment, that coward strike, is everything you need to understand about the man who damned the galaxy. Not a warrior, not a champion, a backstabber who smiles while the knife goes in. And if you think that moment was bad, if you think one murdered captain is the worst thing he's done, you have no idea how deep this goes. Because Erebus didn't just kill one space marine, he killed an empire, killed a dream, killed the future itself. And he did it with the same calculated precision he used on Argyltal, from behind, with a smile. While everyone else was looking the other way, 10,000 years of war, 10,000 years of brothers killing brothers, of worlds burning, of humanity tearing itself apart while Xenos and demons feast on the ruins. If you want to blame one man for all of it, for every drop of blood spilled since the heresy began, you blame Erebus. And by the time you understand what he did, how he did it, and why he did it, you'll understand why his name is spoken with more hatred than any demon prince, any traitor primarch, any enemy of mankind. Because at least daemons are honest about what they are. At least the other traitors can claim corruption, claim they were overcome, claim they didn't fully understand. Erebus understood everything, chose everything, and smiled while the galaxy burned. The world of Colchis was beautiful once, a jewel on the edge of ultramar space, blessed with favorable climate and rich resources. But beauty is often a mask, and Colchis wore its mask well. The dominant power on the planet was the Covenant, a religious institution thousands of years old that taught worship of the old faith, of gods in the warp, of powers beyond human understanding that demanded devotion. Into this world, a child was born. His name is lost now, deliberately erased, because the man who would become Erebus understood that to transform yourself, you must first destroy who you were. He was unremarkable, average in every way. Nothing suggested greatness or doom, nothing except his eyes, which those who met him remembered as cold, evaluating, always watching. He rose through the Covenant's ranks through intelligence and an uncanny ability to tell people exactly what they wanted to hear. The priests saw a true believer, a young man whose devotion burned bright. They were wrong. He believed in the warp gods, yes, but not as a devotee believes. He believed in them as tools, as power to be harnessed. By 30 standard years, he'd killed his first rival, not in combat, through manipulation, spreading rumors, arranging circumstances so the man fell from favor and was cast into the wastelands to die. The young priest attended the exile ceremony and spoke beautiful words about mercy and justice. Those who heard him were moved. None knew he'd orchestrated it all. The Covenant had a tradition. The name Erebus was not a name, but a title, passed to the most promising priest of each generation. To become Erebus was to become the living voice of the old faith. The highest honor the Covenant could bestow, the old priest's name was Erebus. Had been Erebus for 40 years, holder of the sacred title, voice of the gods. He went to sleep one night in his chambers, secure in his position, confident. He didn't hear the young acolyte enter, didn't feel the poison spreading through his veins from the evening meal. When his heart finally stopped hours later, it looked like natural causes, age, the gods calling him home. The young man discovered the body at dawn, wept, Publicly, beautifully, convincingly, the Covenant mourned their loss. And when they asked who should bear the sacred name next, every priest in the temple pointed to the weeping acolyte who had loved the old master so dearly. He took the name Erebus, took the robes, took the authority, and whoever he had been before ceased to exist. There was only Erebus now, only the First Chaplain, only the voice of gods who whispered promises of power to those willing to listen. Then the Imperium came, and everything changed. The Emperor's great crusade arrived in the Colchis system with the 17th Legion at its vanguard. It should have been fire and compliance, but something unprecedented happened. The Legion's commander looked at Colchis and ordered his forces to hold. He came down to the planet's surface himself, unarmed, a giant among men, a being of impossible presence and power. His name was Lorgar. He was one of the Emperor's sons, a Primarch, and he was different from his brothers. Where Guilliman built empires of law, where the lion hunted in shadows, where Russ howled and raged, Lorgar sought meaning, purpose, truth. He'd been raised on Colchis by the Covenant, taught the old faith from childhood. And though he'd cast aside their gods when the Emperor claimed him, something in Lorgar had never stopped seeking, never stopped needing to believe in something greater than himself. Erebus saw this need the moment they met, saw this weakness, and began to work. It took years, patience, a careful orchestration of doubts and revelations, ancient texts mysteriously discovered, theological arguments in quiet hours between campaigns. Erebus served as Lorgar's most trusted advisor, his first chaplain, the one who could be relied upon to speak truth when others told comfortable lies. And slowly, methodically, Erebus poisoned that trust with a different kind of truth. He showed Lorgar texts predating the Covenant, texts speaking of gods in the warp, not as distant cosmic forces, but as active, aware beings who took interest in mortal affairs. He arranged for Lorgar to witness phenomena that couldn't be explained by the imperial truth, things that suggested the universe was stranger and more terrible than the Emperor claimed. The Emperor himself gave Erebus his greatest weapon. The Imperium insisted there were no gods, that religion was superstition, that humanity's salvation lay in reason and science. But Lorgar had seen gods, had felt their presence, and when the Emperor declared such things impossible, declared Lorgar's spiritual nature a weakness to be corrected, something broke in the Primarch's heart. How do you reconcile a father who denies the foundations of your soul, who calls your deepest beliefs lies? You cannot. And Erebus made sure Lorgar understood this. Monarchia was beautiful, every building a prayer in stone, every street aligned to sacred geometry. 2 million souls lived there, all worshipping the Emperor as the god he denied being. The word-bearers had spent decades building it, their masterwork, their gift to their father. The Emperor sent Guilliman to burn it, not to conquer it, not to bring it to compliance, to destroy it, utterly, completely. The Ultramarines virus bombed the entire planet. 2 million dead in hours, every prayer stone shattered, every cathedral reduced to molecular ash. The word-bearers were ordered to the surface after, made to walk through the ruins, made to breathe the death of their greatest achievement. Lorgar stood in the ash, held a fragment of what had been a statue of his father. The stone was still warm. He couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was seeing. Behind him, 50,000 word-bearers stood silent in their ceramite armor, ash settling on their pauldrons like snow. Then the sky tore open with golden light. The Emperor materialized in the ruins with his custodians, 10 feet tall, radiant, terrible. He didn't walk, he simply was, presence filling the space like gravity itself. He looked at Lorgar, looked at the kneeling word-bearers, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire planet. Kneel. They were already kneeling. He made them kneel lower, drove them down into the ash with psychic pressure that made ceramite creak and transhuman hearts stutter. 50,000 warriors in full battle plate pressed face first into the ruins of what they'd built. You are too slow, too distracted. You build monuments when you should make war. You spread religion when you should spread compliance. You waste time on worship and weakness. Lorgar tried to speak. The Emperor silenced him with a gesture. You will obey. You will make war, not monuments. You will serve, not pray, or you will be erased. The Emperor vanished, left them there, kneeling in ash, humiliated before the Ultramarines, before their cousins, before the entire crusade, left to pick themselves up and understand that everything they'd done, everything they'd built, everything they'd believed meant nothing to the man they'd called father. Erebus knelt beside Lorgar through all of it, close enough to hear the Primarch's breathing, hear the way it caught, the way it broke, close enough to feel the psychic weight of a son's heart shattering. And Erebus smiled, though none could see his face beneath his helmet, because this was the moment. This was when the loyal son would turn to his trusted advisor and ask the question that would damn the galaxy. They returned to the fleet in silence. Lorgar went to his chambers and didn't emerge for 3 days. On the 4th day, he summoned Erebus. Just Erebus. No one else. The Primarch stood at the viewport, staring at the empty space where Monarchia had been. Why would he do this to us? The question hung in the air. Erebus had waited years to hear it, had orchestrated everything for this moment. He stepped forward, placed a hand on his Primarch's arm. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, understanding, compassionate. Because he fears you, my lord. Lorgar turned. What? The Emperor is not a man, but a weapon. He doesn't love his sons, he uses them. He's not building a future for humanity but a cage, a prison of reason that will cut mankind off from its true potential. Erebus moved to stand beside Lorgar, looking out at the void. The powers in the warp, the gods you were taught to fear and then deny, they are humanity's birthright. They offer transcendence, truth, everything the Emperor withholds. That's heresy. Is it? Or is the heresy denying what you know to be true? You've felt them, my lord, felt their presence, their reality. The Emperor demands you call them lies, but they're not lies. They're salvation. Lorgar was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. If what you say is true, if the Emperor has lied to us about the fundamental nature of reality, what else has he lied about? Everything, my lord, everything. And in that moment, Erebus won. Lorgar's faith in the Emperor died, and in its place, something darker grew, something that would consume the galaxy. But one corrupted Primarch wasn't enough. The word-bearers alone couldn't unmake the Imperium. For the galaxy to burn as the gods desired, they needed more. They needed the War Master. They needed Horus. Horus Lupercal. First son, greatest general, the Emperor's chosen favorite. If Horus turned, half the Imperium would turn with him. Legions would follow. Worlds would burn. The crusade would consume itself. But Horus was incorruptible. He loved his father, believed in the dream, was the very embodiment of everything the Emperor hoped to create. Erebus. Studied him for years, watched from a distance, searched for the weakness that would allow corruption to take root. What he found was not a flaw in Horus, but a flaw in the system. The Emperor had left the crusade, returned to Terra for some secret project he wouldn't explain even to his most trusted son. And in his absence, he'd left Horus to command everything. The responsibility was overwhelming, the pressure immense, and Horus, for all his strength and brilliance, was still human enough to feel doubt, to wonder if he was truly worthy, to fear failure. Fear is a doorway, and Erebus knew how to open doors. The word-bearers had discovered something in their wanderings through the dark edges of the galaxy, something ancient, something powerful. It was called an anatheme, a weapon forged by a Xenos race long extinct, a blade that could kill anything, even Primarchs. The official report said the word-bearers had destroyed it, presented its shattered fragments to the War Master as proof of victory over the alien. But Erebus had kept the blade intact, hidden it, and given it to those who would use it against Horus himself. The world of Davin was a feral world, primitive but not without value. It was the homeworld of Yugon Temba, a planetary governor who'd served loyally for years before something went wrong. The official reports said Temba had fallen to madness, that his world had devolved into chaos worship. What the reports didn't say, because no one but Erebus knew, was that Temba's corruption was deliberate, guided, a trap with teeth. The trap had a name, the Serpent Lodge, a cult that worshipped the warp powers hidden on Davin for generations. Erebus had discovered them, infiltrated them, turned them into an instrument of Horus's downfall. And when Horus came to Davin to face his old friend Temba, when the War Master descended into the ruins to end the corruption personally, Erebus made sure the anathema was there. Horus entered the temple complex with a small honor guard. Minimal protection. This was beneath his concern. A fallen governor. A feral world. Nothing the War Master couldn't handle personally. Temba was waiting in the central chamber. What had once been Governor Yugon Temba. Now something else. Something swollen with chaos mutation, armor fused to transformed flesh, one arm ending not in a hand, but in a writhing mass of eyes and mouths. Horus, my friend, my War Master. The voice was Temba's, but layered with others. Deeper. Wrong. I gave you this world, bent knee to your father's Imperium, and you left me here to rot. Yugon, what have you become? What I needed to become. What you will become. The gods have shown me the truth, Horus, shown me what your father really is, what he plans for his sons when the crusade ends. Enough. Horus drew Worldbreaker. I gave you honor, Yugon. I'll give you a clean death. The duel was brutal. Quick. Horus was a Primarch. There was never any doubt about the outcome. Worldbreaker crushed Temba's mutated form in 3 strikes. Should have ended there. But as the body fell, one arm lashed out. Not the mutated one. The other, still clutching the weapon Erebus had given him months before. The anatheme. A Xenos blade that killed gods. It bit into Horus's side. Just a scratch. Barely a wound. The blade shattered against ceramite and gene-enhanced bone. Horus looked down at it. Frowned. That actually hurt. Then his legs gave out. The War Master fell, caught by his bodyguard before he hit the ground. They carried him from the temple in a panic, the greatest warrior in the Imperium brought down by a dying governor's strike. By the time they reached the vengeful spirit, Horus was burning with fever, screaming, not from pain but from visions. The poison in the blade wasn't chemical, it was warp-born. It pulled at Horus's soul, dragged at his consciousness, showed him things that weren't real but felt true. Every fear, every doubt, every moment of inadequacy magnified and reflected back. The ship's apothecaries tried everything. Nothing worked. The poison was killing him. And as he died, Horus began to see the future. His future. The Imperium's future. All of it lies, crafted by the gods. But in his weakened state, he couldn't tell the difference. He saw Terra transformed into a temple, not to the Imperium, but to the Emperor alone. Saw the Primarchs forgotten, their names erased, their achievements attributed to the Master of Mankind. Saw Space Marines discarded once their purpose was served, cast aside like broken tools. Saw humanity enslaved to the Emperor's will, all freedom crushed, all glory stolen. None of it was true. All of it felt real. The Serpent Lodge cultists followed the Luna Wolves to the flagship, offered to help, claimed they had healing rituals that could save the War Master, and in their desperation, Horus's advisors agreed. Allowed the ritual, allowed the War Master's spirit to be drawn into the warp itself, where the gods were waiting. Erebus was there, not physically, but in the warp. His voice among the voices of the gods, whispering, guiding, promising another way. That Horus didn't have to accept this future, that he could take what was rightfully his, that he could become the true master of mankind by casting the Emperor down. The gods offered power, offered support, offered legions of demons and the corruption of entire star systems. All Horus had to do was say yes. When Horus woke, he was healed. The poison was gone. He rose from his bed with new strength, new purpose, new conviction. And though he didn't speak of what he'd seen, those closest to him saw the change, saw the anger in his eyes when he thought of Terra, saw how he looked at the Imperium now, not with pride, but with contempt. Something had broken, something had turned, and Erebus, standing quietly among the word-bearers' delegation that had remained aboard the vengeful spirit, allowed himself that smile once more. The plan had worked. The War Master had fallen. Now the galaxy would burn. But corruption is a slow poison, and Horus's turn wasn't complete. He still believed he was saving the Imperium from tyranny rather than destroying it. Still hesitated at certain atrocities, still clung to notions of honor and brotherhood. This couldn't be allowed. For the heresy to succeed, Horus needed to cross a line from which there could be no return. He needed to murder his brothers, needed to commit an act so monstrous that reconciliation would be impossible. Isstvan III was where that line was crossed. Captain Erlen of the World Eaters stood in the ruins of the planetary capital, checking ammunition counts and casualty reports. They'd taken the city, secured the landing zones, done everything their Primarch had asked. The rebellion was crushed. Time for resupply and the next objective. He opened the Vox to the fleet. Captain Erlen to Fleet Command, requesting resupply and second-wave reinforcements. Ready to proceed. Silence. Then a voice he didn't recognize. Cold. Final. There will be no reinforcements, Captain. You have served well. The Legion thanks you for your sacrifice. What? What sacrifice? We've taken the... The sky split open. Not with drop pods, not with reinforcements, with death. Canisters fell by the thousands. Erlen recognized them immediately. Virus bombs, life-eater strain. He'd seen them used once before on a Xenos death world, watched from orbit as an entire ecosystem liquefied in minutes. They were restricted weapons, supposed to be used only on the absolute worst threats to humanity. They were using them here, on loyalists, on brothers. The canisters hit the ground and cracked open. Green mist spread, fast, too fast. Erlen managed 3 steps toward cover before his skin began to burn, before his lungs started to liquefy, before his enhanced biology, all the gene craft that made him transhuman, turned against him and accelerated his dissolution. He tried to scream, couldn't. His throat was melting. He tried to reach for his bolter. His fingers sloughed off. He fell to his knees, drowning in his own liquefied flesh, watching his battle brothers die the same way, watching them claw at their throats, watching them collapse into pools of organic slurry. His last thought, before his brain dissolved, was a question. Why would our father do this to us? All across Isstvan III, the same scene repeated. Thousands of space marines, loyalists who still believed in the Emperor's dream, murdered by their own Primarchs. Not in battle, not with honor, killed like vermin, like things to be exterminated. Then the fleets ignited the atmosphere. The decaying biomass released gases. The gases caught fire. The entire planet became a firestorm that burned for weeks. Some survived, not many. Those deep enough underground, those protected by void shields or librarian barriers. When they emerged and understood what had been done, they didn't surrender. They didn't flee. They were space marines. They fought. Erebus walked through the ashes a week later. Word-bearers swept ahead of him, hunting survivors. He found a cluster of World Eaters barricaded in a collapsed bunker. They'd held out for days, ran out of ammunition, fought with combat knives, then with their hands, then died on their feet. Erebus ordered their bodies burned, their gene seed destroyed, their names erased, and he gave thanks to the gods that such devotion to the Emperor would soon be extinct. But Isstvan III was only the beginning. Isstvan V was where the heresy truly ignited. The massacre on the third planet hadn't gone unnoticed. Terra knew something was wrong. The Emperor sent 7 legions to bring Horus to account. 3 were unquestionably loyal, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard. They would be the vanguard. 4 would provide support. The Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers. Except all 4 support legions had already turned, and the Loyalists were walking into the greatest trap in Imperial history. The vanguard landed at the drop site, secured positions, began their assault on Horus's fortifications, called for support from their brother legions, knowing victory would require overwhelming force. The support came. The 4 legions descended in perfect formation, weapons ready, positioned exactly where they needed to be. And then, at a signal from Horus, they turned their guns on their brothers and opened fire. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Loyalists caught between Horus's fortifications and their own allies. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Just death raining from the sky and tearing through their ranks. Ferrus Manus died there, the Primarch of the Iron Hands, cut down by Fulgrim's blade while his legion burned. His head was taken as a trophy. His sons broke, scattered. Vulcan vanished into the flames, his fate unknown, his salamanders reduced to a handful of survivors. Corax barely escaped with fragments of the Raven Guard, haunted forever by the betrayal he'd witnessed. By the brothers who'd smiled and then murdered him. Tens of thousands of Space Marines died at Isstvan V. Loyalists murdered by those they'd trusted to stand beside them. Erebus watched from a hilltop overlooking the killing fields, stood beside Lorgar, spoke in quiet tones about necessity, about justice, about how the Emperor's dream deserved to die in fire. Lorgar asked him once, in a moment of doubt, visible only to those who knew him, if they'd gone too far, if the price was too high. Erebus's response was simple. There is no price too high, only victory or extinction. And Lorgar, broken by his father's rejection, convinced the Chaos Gods were humanity's salvation, accepted this, believed this. Whatever part of him might have pulled back died in that moment. There was no going back. There was only war. The Horus heresy raged for 7 years. 7 years of brothers killing brothers, of worlds burning, of legions turning on legions. And through it all, Erebus served as advisor, as priest, as the voice of the dark gods made manifest. He orchestrated corruption of entire worlds, spread cults like plague, whispered in traitor Primarchs' ears, encouraged their worst impulses, fed their rage and ambition and despair. When word-bearers summoned demons to battlefields, it was Erebus who led the rituals. When sectors fell to chaos worship, it was Erebus who'd planted the seeds years earlier. He was everywhere, in every shadow, and those who truly knew him understood that of all the traitors in the heresy, Erebus was perhaps the most dangerous, because he wasn't corrupted, wasn't mad, wasn't overcome by the gods' influence. He served chaos willingly, deliberately, joyfully, and that made him something worse than any demon. It made him chaos's perfect instrument. But for all his success, all his careful planning, Erebus made one critical mistake. He believed he was untouchable, believed his position as First Chaplain, his service to the gods, his role as Lorgar's right hand would protect him from consequences. He forgot that some Space Marines don't care about politics or position when someone they love has been murdered. Argel Tal had been a captain in the Word Bearers, a warrior of great skill who'd served with distinction for decades. He'd been part of the pilgrimage to the Eye of Terror, been one of the first possessed, a demon bound within his flesh. And despite this, despite the corruption, he'd held on to some measure of decency, some flicker of what he'd been before the gods claimed him. He had a friend, a brother, a world-eater named Kharn who'd been known before the heresy as one of the most reasonable of Angron's sons. They'd fought together, bled together, shared counsel across years of campaigning, and Erebus had murdered Argel Tal at the Battle of Armatura, stabbed him in the back while Argel Tal was engaged with another foe. Did it to prove a point, to demonstrate that sentiment was weakness, that the old ways were dead. When Kharn learned what had happened, something in him snapped, not into mindless fury, into something colder, more focused. He challenged Erebus to a duel, not immediately, not in heat. Later, in the training cages aboard a word-bearer's vessel, where such matters were traditionally settled. The challenge couldn't be refused without loss of honor, and even Erebus, who cared nothing for honor, couldn't afford to look weak. So he accepted, confident in his skill, confident he could defeat a world-eater whose primary tactic was to charge forward and kill everything in reach. The duel lasted 6 seconds. Gorechild screamed to life. Erebus barely got his Crozius up in time to block. The impact shattered Ceramite, broke his left arm, sent him stumbling back. Pain exploded through his nervous system. He'd never felt anything like it. Kharn didn't pause, didn't breathe, just came forward, like death itself. The second strike took Erebus's weapon, tore it from his grip, sent it clattering across the deck. The third strike hit armor, the fourth hit flesh, the fifth broke ribs, the sixth took Erebus to his knees, blood pouring from a dozen wounds. Kharn stood over him, could have ended it, should have ended it. Instead, he spoke. 2 words, quiet, final. Get up. Erebus tried to stay down, tried to yield. Kharn dragged him to his feet by the throat and beat him down again. Gorechild's teeth tore through power armor like parchment. Blood sprayed the walls, the deck, the watching word-bearers who said nothing, did nothing, because they knew. This wasn't a duel anymore. This was a statement. Get up. Again. Erebus rose. Kharn put him down, rose, down, over and over. Every time Erebus tried to speak, tried to beg, Gorechild found new flesh to ruin, new bones to break. The First Chaplain of the Word-Bearers, architect of the heresy, reduced to a broken thing bleeding on the deck. By the time Lorgar teleported into the cage and ordered it stopped, Erebus was barely conscious, barely alive. Kharn stood over him, breathing hard, not from exertion, but from the effort of not finishing the kill. Even a Primarch's command barely pulled him back. For a moment it seemed he might defy even Lorgar, but he didn't. He stepped back, walked away, left Erebus alive but humiliated, beaten so badly it took days to rebuild him, and that moment became legend. Get up. 2 words that encapsulate everything the Warhammer 40,000 community feels about Erebus, the moment he finally got what he deserved. Not justice, not punishment enough for his crimes, but something. And for a galaxy starved of victories against the architects of its own damnation, it was enough to hold on to. Here's the truly horrible thing about Erebus. He learned nothing from that beating, felt no shame, experienced no moment of self-reflection or doubt. Because Erebus doesn't change, doesn't grow, doesn't become something other than what he's always been. After the beating, he recovered, returned to his position, continued doing exactly what he'd always done, manipulating, corrupting, killing, serving the dark gods with the same cold dedication. If anything, the humiliation made him more dangerous. Now, he was careful, never vulnerable, never alone, never in a position where someone could challenge him without consequence. The siege of Terra was the culmination of everything Erebus had worked for. 7 years of war led to this. Horus at the gates of the Imperial Palace, half the legions turned traitor, demons walking the streets of humanity's cradle world. The Emperor forced to take the field, forced to watch his dream burn, forced to confront the son he'd loved most and see him twisted into something monstrous. Erebus was there. Not on the front lines, never on the front lines. But there, watching, serving, ensuring the Imperium's suffering was total. The Zebsi. Heresy ended with Horus's defeat. The Emperor struck him down but was mortally wounded, consigned to the Golden Throne. A corpse kept alive by machines and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. The traitor legions fled into the Eye of Terror. The Imperium shattered, but not destroyed. And in the aftermath, in the long war that followed, Erebus continued to serve, continued to scheme, continued to be exactly what he'd always been. 10,000 years have passed. 10,000 years of war, of suffering, of the Imperium rotting from within while holding off threats from without. And Erebus is still alive, still active, still serving the dark gods. He leads the Kruer Praetoria now, one of the Word-Bearer's most powerful war bands, a host of corrupted space marines and demon-bound warriors who raid across Imperial space, spreading chaos wherever they go. He's fought against countless heroes, corrupted dozens of worlds, orchestrated atrocities that would fill volumes, and he's never, not once, expressed regret, never questioned his choices, never looked at the galaxy he helped destroy and wondered if perhaps he went too far. Because to Erebus, there is no too far, only victory or defeat, success or failure, service to the gods or betrayal of their gifts, and by his measure, he's been nothing but successful. This is why everyone hates Erebus. Not because he's the strongest villain, not because he's killed the most people or committed the worst single atrocity, but because he represents something uniquely terrible. He's proof that evil doesn't need to be seduced or corrupted. Sometimes it's just a choice. Sometimes it's a man who looks at all the suffering he could cause and decides, yes, I will do this, and I will smile while I do it. Every other traitor has something that makes them tragic or understandable. Horus was manipulated. Lorgar was broken by rejection. Angron was lobotomized. Fulgrim was possessed. Mortarion tried to save his legion. Perturabo was bitter and overlooked. Magnus made a terrible mistake trying to help. Even other chaos worshippers can claim they were seeking power or freedom or some twisted vision of a better future. Erebus has no excuse. He was never corrupted. He corrupted himself. Never manipulated. He was the manipulator. Never overcome. He overcame everyone else. He looked at the Imperium, at the Emperor's dream of a better future, at all the hope and struggle and sacrifice of the Great Crusade, and chose to burn it all down. Not for power. He never sought to rule. Not for freedom. He was already free. Not even for the gods, really, because his devotion isn't worship, but weaponization. He did it because he wanted to, because he could, because the suffering of trillions across millennia was, to him, an acceptable price for proving he was right and the Emperor was wrong. In a galaxy where nobility is rare and honor often a lie and the good die young while the corrupt live forever, Erebus stands as perhaps the purest expression of evil the setting has to offer. Not the most powerful. There are demon princes and chaos gods and Xenos horrors that dwarf him. But the most personal, the most deliberately chosen, the evil that looks you in the eye and tells you it's acting for your benefit, right up until the knife comes out. There's a saying in the Warhammer community, one that transcends language and culture. 2 words that unite every fan in perfect agreement. Fuck Erebus. It's said with venom, with satisfaction when Kharn beats him, every single time he appears in a novel or codex or piece of art. And it's deserved. Absolutely, completely, utterly deserved. Because Erebus didn't just start the Horus heresy. He didn't just damn the galaxy to eternal war. He did it knowing exactly what he was doing, understanding fully the cost, and choosing it anyway. He's not tragic, not sympathetic, not even complex because there's no complexity to him. Only malice, calculation, and absolute certainty that he serves a higher purpose, even as that purpose is nothing more than the ruination of everything good. 10,000 years later, the Imperium still bleeds from wounds he inflicted. Space Marines still fight their corrupted brothers. Worlds still fall to chaos cults that trace their origins to Erebus's preaching. The Emperor still sits on the golden throne, unable to speak or move or guide his people, because Erebus arranged for the War Master to be corrupted and the siege to happen. Every death in the Long War, every Space Marine who falls to chaos, every world devoured by warp storms or demons or traitor armies, can be traced back to that one man on Colchis who decided the gods of chaos deserved his service and the Imperium deserved to burn. He walks the galaxy still schemes, still serves, still corrupts. And somewhere in the dark between stars, in the wars that never end, Erebus smiles and knows that he won. Not the war, perhaps. The Imperium still stands, battered and broken, but standing. But he won in the way that matters to him. He proved faith could be weaponized, that loyalty could be shattered, that even the Emperor's greatest sons could be turned, that 10,000 years of suffering could be traced back to the choices of a single man who understood the levers of power and pulled them with perfect precision. This is Erebus, First Chaplain of the Word-Bearers, Hand of Destiny, architect of the Horus heresy, the man who ruined everything. And the reason why, in a galaxy of monsters and horrors and unimaginable evil, there's one name spoken with more hatred than any other. One name that unites everyone who knows the lore in perfect, crystalline contempt. Fuck Erebus. Now and forever. Fuck Erebus.